In the 1970s, the Indian government initiated policies to encourage foreign companies to invest in local industry. Union Carbide Corporation was asked to build a plant for manufacturing of 7, a pesticide commonly used throughout Asia. As part of the deal, Indian government insisted that a significant percentage of the investment to come from local shareholders. The government itself had a 22% stake in the company's subsidiary, Union Carbide India Limited. The company built the plant in Bhopal because of its central location and access to transport infrastructure. The specific site within the city was zoned for light industrial and commercial use. It provided jobs for hundreds of local workers and significantly improved the economy of the city. It did so well that the company built another plant nearby to manufacture raw material and intermediate for formulation of the final product, all within one facility. For several years, all was going well, until the late 1970s when crop failures famine meant that farmers had less money at their disposal and so were investing much less in pesticides, which then led to the fall in demand for pesticides dramatically. By 1984, the plant was manufacturing at only 25% of its production capacity. Local managers were directed to close the plant and prepare it for sale in July 1984 due to decreased profitability. When no ready buyer was found, company made plans to dismantle key production units to the facility for shipment to some other developing country. In the meantime, the facility continued to operate with safety equipments and procedure far below the said standards. The local government was aware of the safety problems, but it restrained to place any heavy industrial safety and pollution control burden on the struggling industry because it feared the economic effect of the loss of such large employees. Before the 1984 disaster, there were several warning bells, such as in 1976, there were reports of pollution within the plant. When the trade union sent letters to the manager, they never received any answers. In 1981, a worker was flashed with phosgene gas, which resulted in his death 72 hours later. In February of 1982, another gas leak affected 18 workers. Then again in 1982, a chemical engineer came into contact with liquid methyl isocyanate, resulting in burns over 30% of his body. In October 1982, there was again a leak of combination of gases. Following these events, local journalist Rajkumar Keswani began investigating and published his findings in Bhopal's local newspaper, in which he urged the people of Bhopal to wake up. As mentioned earlier, plant was integral to the economy of the city and provided employment to hundreds of local workers, because of which the authorities were restraining from taking any severe action. During the late evening of December 2, 1984, water was believed to have entered tank containing methyl isocyanate through a side pipe during attempts to unclog it. The tank still contained 42 tons of methyl isocyanate that had been there since late October. The introduction of water into the tank resulted into a runaway exothermic reaction. The pressure within the tank, although initially at 14 kilopascal at 10:30 p.m., reached 70 kilopascal as of 11 p.m. Two different senior refinery employees assumed the reading was instrumentation malfunction. By 11:30 p.m., workers in the plant were feeling the effects of minor exposure to the gas and began to look for a leak, which they found at around 11:45 p.m. and reported to the plant supervisor. The decision was made to address the problem after a tea break, and in meantime, employees were instructed to continue looking for the leaks. When the tea break concluded at 12:40 a.m., the reaction inside the tank skyrocketed to a critical state at an alarming speed within 5 minutes. Temperature in the tanks were off the scale, and the pressure in the tank was indicated at 280 kilopascals. One employee witnessed a concrete slab above the tank crack as the emergency relief valve burst open and pressure in the tank continued to increase to 380 kilopascals. Despite atmospheric venting of toxic gas having begun, direct atmospheric venting should have been prevented or at least partially mitigated by a flat tower, which was meant to burn the gas as it escaped. But due to the maintenance, its pipe had been removed and it was improperly sized to neutralize a leak of the size produced by the tank. About 30 tons of methyl isocyanate escaped from the tank into the atmosphere in 45 to 60 minutes. This would then increase to 40 tons within 2 hours. The gases were blown in a southeast direction over the Bhopal. One of the plant workers triggered the plant's alarm system at 12:50 am as the concentration of gas in and around the plant became difficult to tolerate. Activation of the system triggered 2 siren alarms, one that specifically sounded inside the plant itself and second directed towards the exterior, which would alert the general public and the city of Bhopal. The 2 siren systems had been decoupled from one another in 1982, so that it was possible to leave the factory warning siren on while the public one remained inactive. This is what had occurred. The public siren briefly sounded at 12:50 am and was quickly turned off as per company's procedure meant to avoid alarming the public around the factory over some inconsequential leak. Workers meanwhile evacuated the plant. Residents of the neighborhood of Chol were fleeing a gas leak at approximately 1 am. A town inspector informed Bhopal police station. Calls to the plant by police between 1:25 and 2 am gave them assurances twice that everything was okay, and on the last call made, the plant employee said, "We don't know what has happened yet, sir." With the lack of timely information between the plant and Bhopal authorities, the city hospital was first told that the gas leak was suspected to be ammonia, then later phosgene. Finally, they received an updated report that it was methyl isocyanate, which the hospital staff had never heard of, had no antidote for, and knew no immediate information about. The gas leaking from the tank started fading at about 2 am. 15 minutes later, plant's public siren was sounded for an extended period of time, after having been quickly silent an hour and a half earlier. Some minutes after that, plant's employee walked into a police station to inform them of the leak. Initial effect of exposure to the methyl isocyanate were coughing, severe eye irritation, a feeling of suffocation, burning sensation in throat, breathlessness, stomach pain, and vomiting. People alerted by these symptoms fled from the plant. Those who ran inhaled more than those in the vehicles. Owing to the height, children and other residents of shorter stature inhaled higher concentration, as methyl isocyanate gas is twice as dense as air and in an open environment has a tendency to fall towards the ground. Within hours, the streets of Bhopal were littered with human corpses and carcasses of cow, dogs, birds, and other animals. An estimated 4,000 people died immediately, and another 1,000 died by the following morning. Primary cause of death being choking, refluxogenic circulatory collapse, and pulmonary edema. Horrifying effects of the gas leak were numerous. People died in their homes or fell ill while attempting to flee the area. Hospitals were overwhelmed with more than 170,000 casualties, and flora and fauna of the surrounding area were also affected. Food and medical supplies were badly needed, but due to the mass hysteria, delivery drivers were afraid to enter the affected area, creating a secondary humanitarian crisis. Survivors were left with few resources, a completely overwhelmed healthcare system, and injuries that ranged from liver damage to blindness. In the aftermath of the incident, the gas leak continued to exert a terrible toll on the local population. Infant mortality doubled, and thousands of people experienced increased incidences of cancer and birth complications. The immediate response to the disaster lasted for months, but the people in the area around the plants continued to suffer for many more years. In March 1985, the Indian government enacted the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act. The act made the Indian government the sole representative of the victims in legal proceeding, both within and outside India. After 4 years of legal proceedings, an out-of-court settlement was mediated by Indian Supreme Court, in which Union Carbide Corporation accepted moral responsibility and agreed to pay $470 million to the Indian government, which to be distributed among claimants as full and final settlement. The figure was partly based on the disputed claim that only 3,000 people died and 100,000 suffered permanent disabilities. Both numbers were, by most measures, a huge underestimations. In terms of personal responsibility, the CEO of Union Carbide Corporation, Warren Anderson, was arrested and then released on bail in India. He fled the country, and when he was summoned back to face charges, he did not comply. The United States also declined to extradite him. In July 2010, more than 25 years after the gas leaks, 7 former plant employees were convicted of death by negligence. They were sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined equivalent of $2,500. They were all released on bail shortly after the verdict. But there still exists a strong sense of injustice in Bhopal, as only 500,000 people have received compensation for their injuries, and just over 15,000 relatives of the victim have been compensated, receiving on average $2,200 each. Meanwhile, Union Carbide India Limited plant still sits abandoned in the city, leaking toxic chemicals into the vicinity. More than any other disaster in the nation's history, Bhopal gas tragedy remains an open wound, a tragedy for which there has been inadequate compensation and little accountability.